Dear chosen one, throughout your life, they tried to convince you that your voice didn't matter. From a young age, you noticed that your words made people uncomfortable, that your questions challenged them, and that whenever you took a stand, someone tried to silence you. You felt it was easier to stay quiet than to be questioned, ignored, or even ridiculed. But deep inside, there was always a part of you that refused to accept this silence. There was always a part of you that knew it wasn't just bad luck. It was a pattern, a constant attempt to keep you from seeing your own worth and the power of your truth. But now, something inside you is changing. Can you feel this restlessness, this sense that you can no longer stay silent? Your voice has always carried weight, and that's why, from the beginning, they tried to erase your presence, divert your focus, and weaken your confidence. The truth is, your existence disturbs those who live by appearances. You were never an ordinary person, and that has always instilled fear in those who try to keep everything under control. The problem was never you. The problem has always been what you represent. A spirit that questions, a gaze that sees beyond the surface, a being that refuses to live within an imposed lie. Now, the only choice left is whether you will continue to hold this voice inside or finally allow it to resonate throughout the world. The silence they tried to impose on you wasn't just about words, it was a direct attack on your essence, an effort to keep you discredited, to make you doubt your own worth. But none of that can hold you back anymore. What's happening now is inevitable. You are awakening. You are realizing that you never needed anyone's permission to exist in your full truth. The spell they cast on you is dissolving because the one thing they didn't foresee is that your essence would always find a way to shine. From an early age, you noticed that some people didn't react well when you expressed yourself. Whenever you spoke something true, you could sense the discomfort in their eyes. It wasn't the content of your words that bothered them. It was the fact that you saw what no one wanted to admit. How many times were you interrupted? How many times were your opinions dismissed as exaggeration? This wasn't a coincidence. You were conditioned to believe it was better not to speak, that if you wanted to be accepted, you needed to stay silent. But the truth never stopped pulsing within you, waiting for the right moment to be heard. The people around you may not have always realized what they were doing, but the intention behind it was clear. They taught you to doubt yourself. When you were a child, they told you that you were imagining things. As you grew older, they called you sensitive or paranoid. The goal was always the same: to discredit your perception and make you, in the end, choose silence yourself. And for a long time, perhaps without realizing it, you accepted this. You began to hold back words, to think twice before speaking, to choose silence as a way to avoid conflict. But in doing so, you also began to drift away from your essence. There were moments when you wanted to scream but couldn't find the strength. Moments when you saw injustices happening but felt like no one would listen to you. This was because, throughout your life, they made you believe your voice had no impact, that no one cared, that it was easier to give up than to persist. But something inside you never fully accepted this reality. There were days when your desire to speak was so strong that it overflowed in your gaze, in your actions, in the small expressions that said more than words ever could. The imposed silence was never absolute. Your truth always tried to find a way. And that's why some people started treating you strangely, even when you said nothing. Have you noticed how sometimes your mere presence can change the atmosphere of a room? This happens because, even when they tried to silence your voice, your energy always spoke louder. You didn't need to defend yourself, because the simple fact of your presence challenged the lies others told themselves. But instead of recognizing this, many chose to attack you, isolate you, and treat you as someone who doesn't fit. This isolation wasn't a coincidence. It was a strategy to convince you that the problem was you, when in reality, it was always their fear. The fear of your truth made many want you to doubt it. The world teaches people to follow a script, and anyone who strays from it is seen as a problem. But what happens when someone refuses to follow that script? What happens when, despite the pressures, someone insists on being who they truly are? These people are questioned, discredited, and challenged in every possible way. And this happened to you. They knew that if they didn't silence you, sooner or later, you would realize your strength. And if that happened, there would be nothing they could do to control you. But you are here. You survived all the attempts to silence you. Even when they doubted you, even when they made you question your own perception, something inside you never gave up. You may have stayed silent for a while. You may have felt fear, but you never completely lost your essence. And now, that essence is returning with full force. What was silenced is about to be spoken. What was contained is about to be exposed. And the truth they tried to hide within you is about to be revealed to the world. Now, the game is changing. Those who tried to keep you small already sense that they no longer have power over you. You no longer need to ask for permission to be who you are. You no longer need to hold back your voice out of fear of displeasing others. They wanted you to believe you were insignificant, but you are beginning to see what has always been obvious. You never needed anyone's approval to exist in the full intensity of your truth. The time for silence is over. And those who tried to silence, you will now have to face the fact that you are ready to be heard. Chosen one, when you began to realize that you no longer needed to stay silent, the world around you started to react. Those who were used to your silence became uncomfortable. People who once ignored you began to pay attention to every word you said. This didn't happen because your voice suddenly gained value. It always had value. But now, you've started using it with conviction. This makes those who live by appearances feel exposed, because someone who no longer fears expressing themselves becomes a threat to any system based on control. They never wanted you to understand the power of your words. Have you noticed how some people try to ridicule or minimize those who take a stand? This happens because, if they can't silence you, they'll try to make you doubt what you're saying. The most interesting thing is that they don't do this to just anyone. They attack those who speak inconvenient truths. What they once called exaggeration is now being recognized as clarity. What they tried to dismiss as sensitivity was, in fact, always sharp perception. And this scares those who benefited from your silence. They know that if you keep speaking, many others will also awaken. But there's something you need to understand. The resistance you face isn't a sign to give up. On the contrary, it's an indication that you're on the right path. If your voice had no power, no one would be bothered by it. If your truth weren't relevant, no one would try to discredit it. The fact that you're being confronted is proof that you're breaking patterns. Many didn't expect you to survive all the attempts to erase you and come back stronger than ever. You're no longer the person who stayed silent to avoid trouble. Now, you understand that your voice is your greatest strength, and that's why, the more you express yourself, the more you notice changes in your life. Some people start to distance themselves, but others appear. You attract those who resonate with your truth and repel those who lived off your silence. This may feel strange at first, but it's a sign of liberation. Those who were by your side only because you didn't assert yourself were never truly by your side. Now, everything aligns. The connections that remain are the ones that truly matter. Your voice is clearing your path, bringing closer only what is true, and pushing away what never belonged to you. This process can be uncomfortable because it requires you to face your own shadows. For years, you grew accustomed to holding back, to be accepted. Now, you need to get used to being whole, even if it bothers some. But realize how liberating this is. You no longer need to carry the weight of others' approval. You no longer need to measure every word out of fear of rejection. What once seemed like a risk has now become a relief. Because, finally, for the first time in a long time, you are being yourself without restrictions. And this can no longer be interrupted. Expressing yourself isn't just about speaking. It's about existing authentically. You don't need to shout to be heard, because your presence already carries a message. Your posture, your actions, and your energy say it all. When you stop fearing rejection, people begin to see you in a new light. The respect you've always sought won't come from submission, but from the courage to be who you are. And the more you accept this truth, the more you realize that you never needed to mold yourself to fit into small spaces. You were born for something greater than this. And now you're ready to take your place. And now that your voice has returned, there's no turning back. You've spent too much time trying to fit in, trying to be convenient, trying to please. But that time is over. You realize that deep down, you never wanted acceptance. You wanted freedom. And freedom will never come from silence. You're not here to be invisible. You're not here to live as a character in someone else's narrative. You're here to be heard, to occupy the space that has always been yours. And most importantly, to never again allow anyone to silence what you have to say. The time to hide is over. Have you noticed how silence can be an invisible prison that traps your essence without you even realizing it? For years, you held back words, repressed feelings, and avoided conflicts just to fit into a world that seemed unwilling to hear what you had to say. But all that restraint came at a high cost, because the more you held back your truth, the further you drifted from yourself. But now, you feel that something has changed, don't you? There's an impulse within you that can no longer be ignored. A need to finally break free from everything that has kept you from expressing yourself fully. The world is full of voices that merely repeat what has already been said, following a pre-written script that favors those who want to keep things exactly as they are. But you never fit into that mold, and that has always bothered those who can't handle the unexpected. From an early age, your way of thinking challenged the norm. Your words questioned absolute certainties, and your presence made some feel uncomfortable without even knowing why. But the truth is, whenever someone refuses to follow the flow, they inevitably become a threat to those who live trapped in the convenience of conformity. Many times, you hesitated before speaking, weighing whether it was worth expressing what you truly thought, or if it was better to stay silent to avoid being misunderstood or ridiculed. But the thing is, every time you chose silence, you weren't just protecting your momentary peace. You were also allowing the world around you to keep functioning in the same way. It may have taken you a while to realize, but there are people who need to hear what you have to say because your voice could be the missing piece to awaken something within them. And if you choose to stay silent, you may never know how many lives you could have touched. For a long time, you were taught to ignore your intuition and discredit your own perceptions, believing that others knew more than you and that questioning was a sign of immaturity or rebellion. But now, you're beginning to realize that everything they told you to ignore was, in fact, what made you unique. The problem was never you. but the fact that the world has always feared those who see beyond appearances and refuse to accept the ready-made truths handed to them. The time to hold back and pretend you don't see has come to an end, and now your only option is to embrace the strength of your voice without fear of the impact it may have. And when you finally allow your voice to manifest without restrictions, the world around you inevitably changes. Some people distance themselves because they don't know how to handle the authentic version of who you are, while others draw closer because they recognize the strength in your truth. You no longer need to try to please those who never truly saw you, because now you understand that it's not your responsibility to fit into spaces designed to diminish you. Your only responsibility is to be true to yourself, no matter what that means for those who prefer to live in denial. You've already wasted too much time trying to be understood by people who never truly wanted to listen to you. But now you realize that your voice doesn't need permission to exist. From the moment you express yourself without fear, everything begins to reorganize. Opportunities arise naturally, connections deepen, and your presence gains a weight it never had before. You no longer need to fight to be noticed or beg to be heard, because your authenticity speaks for itself. And those who tried to silence you are now forced to deal with the fact that you can no longer be ignored. And that is the true victory. Realizing that no matter what they did to silence you, none of it had enough power to stop your truth from emerging. You've endured all the attempts to diminish you, overcome all the doubts planted in your mind, and resisted all the situations that tried to make you give up on yourself. And now, you finally understand that you never needed anyone's validation to exist in your fullness. The time for silence is over, and those who tried to silence you will have to face the reality that your voice is stronger than ever. Have you noticed that when you start expressing yourself fearlessly, some people react as if your freedom were an affront? This happens because many have grown accustomed to seeing you in silence, accepting everything without question. When you break this pattern and embrace your true voice, those who were comfortable with your submission feel like they've lost control. It's not about what you say, but the fact that you're no longer a predictable piece in their game. And that scares them because people who become self-aware can no longer be manipulated. So, don't be surprised if, as you reclaim your voice, you notice some people starting to avoid you, reacting with irony, or attacking you subtly. This doesn't mean you're wrong, it means your presence bothers those who benefited from your silence. These reactions aren't signs for you to retreat, but proof that you're on the right path. Because whenever someone breaks an imposed pattern, those who lived off it feel the threat of losing control. But this battle was never yours, and you don't need to worry about those who refuse to see. What scares those who try to silence you the most isn't just what you say, but the fact that your courage can awaken others. They know that a single voice can create a domino effect, and that's why they worked so hard to convince you it was better to stay silent. But now that you've realized this, there's no turning back. You know what happens when someone allows themselves to exist without filters, without fear, and without the need for validation. The truth spreads, masks fall, and those who once seemed unshakable begin to lose control over their own illusions. And even if some try to convince you that you're exaggerating, that your perception isn't real, or that what you say doesn't matter, remember that these attempts are part of the process. What they called stubbornness was, in fact, a survival instinct. What they called sensitivity was a sharp perception few possess. What they tried to reduce to drama was always a sign that you saw beyond what they wanted you to see. Now, you no longer need to justify yourself because the only validation that matters is your own. The time when you needed to ask for permission to exist fully is behind you. You've spent too long molding yourself to what others expected of you, But now you realize that your strength has always been in being exactly who you are, without compromise. And as you free yourself from imposed expectations, you gain something priceless: the ability to live without carrying the weight of others' approval. Does this mean some will walk away? Yes. But it also means you'll attract those who truly see your worth. You no longer need to beg for acceptance, because now you understand that your space is already yours by right. And this is when the transformation is complete. What once caused you fear now becomes freedom. What once held you back now propels you forward. You no longer need to try to prove anything to anyone, because you've realized that the only validation you need comes from within. When you speak, it's not just sound. It's strength, identity, existence. And no matter how much they try to distort, minimize, or ignore it, the truth always finds a way to manifest. Your voice can no longer be erased because it no longer depends on others' acceptance, but on the certainty you have about who you are. And now that you've come this far, you need to ask yourself, what still holds you back from expressing yourself completely? Is there something still tying you down? Or has that bond already been broken within you? Because the truth is, when someone awakens to their own voice, there's no turning back. There's no more room for hesitation. There's no more doubt about what needs to be done. You've already felt the weight of freedom, already experienced the power of being who you truly are. And from this moment on, nothing can make you return to silence. You finally belong to yourself. Now that you've freed yourself from silence, you're ready to live without limitations. Don't be mistaken. This isn't an easy path, but it's the only one that brings true fulfillment. It's not about having a powerful voice just to stand out, but about being able to affirm your presence in the world without fear, without reservations, without excuses. How many times have you hidden your true essence out of fear of rejection or misunderstanding? But now, you know that the only way to live authentically is to allow yourself to be who you truly are. And this process is irreversible because, in reclaiming your voice, you're also reclaiming the right to be truly free. Fear will never completely disappear. And to be honest, it was never the real enemy. The real enemy is the silence you allow to settle within you. Fear, when confronted, loses its power. And instead of running from it, you'll learn to use it as fuel to move forward. When someone stands up, challenges the system, and refuses to be ignored, fear becomes a shadow with no power over the light of truth. If you're afraid of making mistakes, being misunderstood, or failing, remember that the only true failure is staying silent in the face of your own greatness. The only failure that exists is letting life pass you by while you remain silent. A person's greatness isn't measured by their ability to please others, but by their capacity to remain true to themselves, regardless of others' opinions. The moment you stopped hiding, you began to truly live. True freedom comes from being who you are, without molds, without restrictions, without asking for permission. Every time you speak the truth, every time you take a stand, you're telling the world that you'll no longer submit to the idea that you need to be accepted to be valuable. Your authenticity is your greatest strength. It's not about what others think, but about how you see yourself. What you have to say has value because it comes from a soul that has chosen to free itself from fear and oppression. Now, your voice has become unstoppable because it's genuine. When you allow yourself to be who you are, without worrying about others' approval, life begins to align with your true desires. What once seemed like a battlefield now transforms into a journey of self-expression and empowerment. As you free yourself from the expectations others tried to impose, you begin to attract the right people. Those who recognize you not for what you do, but for who you are. And in this way, freedom spreads, not just within you, but also in those around you. Because by living your truth, you inspire others to do the same. Chosen one, you now understand the magnitude of your voice and the impact it can have on the Hao world. There's no more room for silencing your truth, for hiding in the shadows of fear. You are a unique and powerful force, and the world needs to hear your message. So, walk with confidence, knowing that silence is no longer an option. Every word you speak, every action you take, will be an affirmation of your presence in the world. What once seemed impossible is now within your reach, because you've freed yourself from the chains. Now that you're ready to embrace your truth and make your voice heard, don't forget to share this video with those who also need to hear this powerful message. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more transformative content. In the comments, write the number 777. It's quick, and in doing so, you manifest to the universe that you're ready to live without fear of showing your essence. Thank you to everyone who has supported the channel so far. If you'd like to contribute so we can continue creating quality content, consider supporting the channel through our Buy Me a Coffee link, pinned in the first comment. Every gesture of support is greatly appreciated. And if you haven't yet watched the video from the playlist of the Secrets of the Chosen Ones, click on the screen now and prepare yourself for more revelations that will transform your journey. Remember, you are unique and have a purpose only you can fulfill. Until the next video, and may God always bless you.